I'm very honored to be talking to your group. I'm assuming that some basic knowledge is already there. And I will let you know when we need to start the slides. Okay, before that, let me give some background on what is the nature of Vaastu Shastra and how critical it is in your own lives. Okay. The reason is because there is so much of fear being pushed by various practitioners as well as websites. I get so many clients who come to me because they are terrified of some of the things that they can download, which tell them their entrance is in the wrong place, kitchen is in the wrong place, they're looking at the wrong direction when they're cooking, and so on. So this whole concept of right and wrong, good and bad, this whole thing of black and white, constantly looking at polarized reality, is something that is not part of Sanatana Dharma at all. Sanatana Dharma has always looked at varieties of options. There is never either or. There is always a middle ground. And if you look at some of the other systems like Jainism and Buddhism and all that, they actually look at 8 points of references. It is okay, not okay, both okay and not okay, neither okay, nor not okay, and so on, and variations within this. So there is a possibility of looking at reality in a way that would be joyous, capable of uplifting you, and giving you a better understanding of the world around you. Unfortunately, whether you take the medical system, or you take Ayurveda, or you take Vaastu, today the driving force is to make you feel scared. And therefore, you become dependent on whomever you're calling the expert. The expert comes and tells you, do this, don't do this. And you completely buy into that. You don't get operated tomorrow morning, I cannot promise you what will happen to you. The doctor is telling you. If you don't change your kitchen, I don't know what will happen to you. And so on. So what is the basis of the Vaastu Shastra? What is the historical basis? Why has it suddenly become so critical or central in our lives? Where was it all these years? Was it in hiding? Was it that nobody understood it? Who is bringing it back into the mainstream? So let's look a little bit at all this before we go into my talk. In the 90s, late 80s actually, 1980 to about 1992, I was actually working with Ganapati Stapati in all his projects, studying with him. And in 92, I started my own practice. I went to him in 82. All right. I was quite young at that time. And no architecture school had even heard about Vaastu Shastra. It was unknown at that time. So a lot of people thought I was mad to go into the traditions. So I spent 12 years with him, right? And when I came back, suddenly in the 90s, Vaastu Shastra had become a buzzword. And why is that? Because there's a lot of money in it. As to most of the systems in every part of our life, when something can immediately give you cash, many people get onto the bandwagon. And most of the people who got onto the bandwagon were actually astrologers. They had nothing to do with the Vaastu Shastra. Some of them haven't even studied the texts. And those of you who have a background, some understanding of Ayurveda and yoga, which are, I believe, very similar practicing traditions, there is a text and there's a practitioner. Both have to come together for it to make sense. You can't just study a text and become an Ayurvedic doctor. Just like you cannot read through a book on physiology and become a doctor in the modern system, in the allopathic system. Similarly, Ayurveda, yoga also, you can't read the Yoga Sutras and become a practitioner. There is an element of experiential learning. You have to understand. It has to be embodied. You have to be a person who holds that knowledge and you have practiced it. In today's modern parlance, it is you have to walk the talk. You can't just read 10 books, download some 20 things, and become an expert overnight. It is not possible. Okay, then what is it that it is really talking about? Just like any other kind of architecture, modern architecture, the tradition of architecture is what is known as Vaastu Shastra. Okay, the word Vaastu comes from the word Vastu and the word Vas. Vastu means an object. Vas means is to reside. So Vaastu is the space in which an object resides. So if I take my phone, this is a Vastu. I place it on my hand and the phone becomes a Vastu on my palm, which is a Vaastu. Okay. So there is a direct relationship between object and space. And therefore, the vibration of the object, its proportion, its aesthetic sensibility, and the space it occupies directly have a correlation. Okay. So if I place a beautiful piece of sculpture on a table in my room, the quality of the room and its space will change before I place the sculpture and after I place the sculpture. The energy in that room will be very different. Why is that? Because that space occupied by that object has an impact on my sensory perception. If it has a smell, my olfactic sensibilities are vibrated and I sense the object. It has a lovely fragrance and I can sense the object. I see it, I can touch it, I can feel it. And with my eyes closed, the presence of that object is there in my consciousness. Okay, so Vastu Shastra is really a design and spatial energetic subject, which is talking about relationship of directions, time, space, and energies. All of them it is talking about. It's not just about saying, if you keep your kitchen in the southeast, everything will be fine. Everything cannot be fine. Everything is fine only when you look at many parameters. It is not a standalone. If you're eating bad food, and if you're not exercising, and you have sleepless nights, just by keeping your kitchen in the southeast, you're not going to be fine. You have to look at your body, you have to look at the space you occupy, the colors you've used in the room. What are the ways in which you are relating yourself to the space? What is your identification with that energy field, and so on. So it's a very complex and a vast subject. What we are going to do now is to go on a brief journey to look at some of the elements that the texts have talked about, which we can use in our everyday life as a designer and as an occupant of a space. Okay? And like in all traditions from the Sanatana system, everything comes back to the self. When I tune my instrument to a very high degree of sensitivity, the energies that I pull into myself will be balanced. And when that energy and I are in balance, the space I occupy will also be balanced. Which is why when you meet realized people with a high spiritual advancement, you can feel their presence. You become very quiet. The chattering in your mind will come to rest. Because their vibration is actually assisting you to touch that higher self which each of us has. Every human being has a higher self. So when you're in the presence of somebody who is constantly in a state of heightened higher self, you also will touch that part of yourself. And then when you go home, it'll all go away, which is why we call it Purana Vairagyam. You are able to experience it briefly in the presence of this wonderful person. Similarly, in a beautifully built temple, when you walk into it, there is an energy field that has been created through the architecture, through the relationship of space and form, through the rhythm of the form, proportions, rhythms. It is a modular system, and it is also a frequency. Okay. So all this is encompassed by Vaastu, Shilpa, Shastra. Vaastu being space, Shilpa being form, Shastra being a treatise or a text. Okay. Originally, there were, I believe, 64 texts of Vaastu, Shilpa, Shastra. Over time, many of them have disappeared. 32 have been named. Ganapati Stapati used to have over 20. I have about 8 with me. These are the texts that were written in Sanskritam. And then you have regional texts. In Tamil, it's called Maniyadi Shastram. You have Gujarati texts, Marathi texts, Bengali texts, and so on, which are local variations. And then the Puranas also talk about Vastu Shastra. For example, in the Ramayana, there's a lovely little sequence. Rama, Lakshmana, and Sita have gone to the forest, and they decide to build a small kutil, a small hut with the local materials, wood and thatch and everything. And it says there, Lakshmana, who was a very good builder, with the help of Sri Rama, was able to build it according to the tenets of Vastu Shastra, which is a very interesting statement, which means that the Shastra was already available before the Satya Yuga, right? So you have this kind of references in all the Puranas and the Itihasa, as well as in the Surya Siddhanta. There is a great deal of information about Vastu Shastra. Okay, so we need to now look at what is the broad basis of this tradition, which has a meaning and a relevance in our own everyday life. Okay, so let's have the first slide. Yeah. The next one. I will start by showing you 2 of the great Stapatis of yesteryear. Let's have the next slide. This is my teacher, Ganapati Stapati's father, Sri Vaidyanatha Stapati. He was a very, very interesting personality because those of you who know about Sri Ramana Maharishi, he was the Asthana Stapati of Ramana Maharishi, which means he lived in Tiruvannamalai most of the time. He designed the Tiruvannamalai campus. Many of the buildings there were designed by him. And one of his most famous contemporary buildings is the Gandhi Mandapam in Chennai, which is in Gindi. And I studied in the School of Architecture. It was exactly opposite our college. So almost every day we would be sitting there in our lunchtime. Beautifully built, extremely well executed. He was a scholar, Samskrita scholar, and he received the National Award in 1960. The next one. Yeah. This is Sri Amritalingam Stapati, who is from the Kongunadu, which is the Coimbatore district. He was also a great craftsman and an architect. And one of his famous examples is this Mani Mandapam in Pollachi. What is very important there is it's made out of a single stone. So you can see the intricacy of the carving, and the single stone carving has been there in the earlier past, which means in Vijayanagara, in Tirunelveli, in the Nelayappa temple, you have a composite column where one stone has been made into 8-10 columns. So we are not talking about architects like me, where we studied, we draw, we don't know how to sculpt. He also sculpted. He was one of the main sculptors for this particular piece. The next one. Yeah. So this is a very beautiful verse from the Shilpi, which will make a lot of sense to many of you. It says, in sound through music, in the body through dance, in words through poetry, in space through architecture, in form through sculpture, in thought through mathematics, the devotee touches the divine. So many pathways have been given in the Gandharva Veda tradition. As you know, the Vaastu Shilpa Shastra is part of the Gandharva Veda. So in those traditions, all 6 pathways lead you to the divine. The next one. So here, this is a very critical thing. Please pay attention to this. Today, the educational system, as well as our lifestyle, is over-focusing on what we call the rational mind. What I see is what I get. What is tangible is all there is. There is nothing more than that. But there is a whole other reality, which is the spiritual or the mystical side of oneself, which knows without any proof, which intuitively perceives. Like many of you would have had that experience of walking into a space and finding that there's somebody there who is giving you very negative feelings and your whole body reacts. Similarly, when you see somebody who has very positive energy field, you feel attracted to that person. And there is no rational sort of a conclusion for this. You just know. Intuitively, you know. So there is this need today to bring both these minds and use them together. And that is what is going to make us actually very, very sensitive. You cannot be sensitive by using only your rational mind. Your sensitivity is this other mind, mystical mind, which is capable of picking up things without your brain telling you it's right or wrong. Okay, the next one. So this is where I started, if you remember, that there are 3 very important traditions which have texts and which are very, very powerful in their practice, in their application. Which is why you have communities of people who have fostered it, safeguarded it for thousands of years, and who make it available to us today. Yoga is, in my opinion, the most important, because yoga is not just hatha yoga or what they are calling practice on the mat. Yoga means an ability to create an alignment between your different parts. My body, my mind, my breath, my thoughts, my feelings, when they all align, you are in a state of yoga. Okay. So when you are in a state of yoga and you are capable of healing people intuitively, that becomes Ayurveda. Ayurveda is not just knowing the prescriptions and the cures. It means intuitively understanding perfect balance in every individual and guiding them to touch that perfect balance within themselves, which is the whole concept of Prakriti and so on. Then Vaastu is that ability to understand energy fields spaces, forms, and the rhythms or frequencies that relates the form with the space. So all of them are very, very important. To be a good Vastu practitioner, I also have to touch balance within myself. I have to also understand good food, good habits, personal habits. Only then I will be able to assist someone to create a home that will bring about balance and harmony. Okay, the next one. There are 3 anchors of design that have been spoken about in the Vastu Shastras. This is a reference that comes from Mahabharata. There is a sequence where when the forests are burning and Arjuna is standing outside, there is this man who runs out from the forest and falls at their feet and says, please save me. I am Maya, the architect of the Asuras, and I can help you if you will only take care of me now. So they are supposed to have, Yudhishthira and Arjuna and Krishna are supposed to have assisted him, and he is supposed to have assisted them in building the Maya Sabha in Hastinapur, in the Indraprastha. So when the Maya Sabha was being built, he talks about 3 basic anchors of design: Bhogadyam, Sukha Darshanam, and Ramyam. Ramyam or Ramya. Bhogadyam means that which is utilitarian, that which is useful. So if I have a cup of water, the cup must be capable of holding the water and capable of being handled with ease. That becomes Bhogadyam. The cup, if it is hot water, must have a handle or some such a device so that I can hold it without getting burnt. Right? All this becomes usefulness. It also has to be aesthetically pleasing. An ugly cup is not something you and I will buy. Right? And then, if it is made of mud, if it's perfectly proportioned, like a kullad, and then you use it for either the cold or the hot drink, it also gives you delight. Because when you're handling it, it feels wonderful to the touch. And that is Ramya. So that which is useful, which is aesthetically pleasing, and that which offers delight to the user is known as the basis of Vastu Shilpa Shastra. Next one. Yeah. So there is a lot of data on the Vastu Purusha Mandala. Many of you would have heard about it, wondered what it is all about. Always, endlessly, there is this being lying down with his head towards the northeast. There is a story behind it, just like every other part of Sanathana Dharma. And the story is that there was this amazing, powerful energy that came out of the yaga in Indraloka. And this Purusha that came out of the yaga, Agni, was supposed to assist them in their work, the Devas. But over time, he became very proud. He became very aggressive. He also became very, desirous of hurting, of harming. So then, when an energy moves towards this negative side, we call it Asura. The same energy, when it starts becoming contained and capable of doing something that is harmonious and beautiful, we call it Deva. Okay. So this energy, which was brought from the fire to be a Deva and an assistant to the Deva, moved into becoming an Asura and started becoming destructive. So the Devas got very agitated. They go to Brahma and say, how do we handle this? So he says, do not worry. I will trap this energy and keep it in a trapped state until he is capable of awakening to his own positive aspects, his own Daivik aspects. So it is said that this energy was trapped onto the earth. So this Vastu Purusha is the energy of the earth. which is dormant, which is sleeping. So when you want to build on it, or when you want to plant on it, it can be agriculture, it can be a built form. You beckon, call upon this Vaastu Purusha at the right season. The Panchangam will tell you which are the days in the year when the Vaastu Purusha is awake. So on those days, you call upon the Vaastu Purusha, you offer him many things, and you allow him to become part of your life, either by planting and seeding, or making a foundation and starting your built form. So Vaastu Purusha is essentially the sleeping or dormant energy held within the earth, which when called in the right way will assist you to have a better life. Okay.